that violence was quelled. I'm not even going to go there.
This is a political storm. It will have ramifications, but it is mostly a human tragedy, and so cruelly on this Thanksgiving Day. Mark Stone, Sky News in Washington.
Well, in other news tonight, a car wash owner has been sentenced to 8 years and 6 months in prison after being convicted of human trafficking and exploiting 8 Romanian nationals. 45-year-old Hawa Magari forced the victims to work at the car wash in South London and subjected them to mental and physical abuse. The French President Emmanuel Macron has unveiled a new voluntary national military service due to start next summer. He said 3,000 young people will be chosen for the scheme, which will be open to 18 and 19-year-olds. It's hoped 10,000 new recruits will join the armed forces by 2030. Pope Leo has used his first overseas trip since becoming head of the Catholic Church to warn that the future of humanity is at stake. The pontiff is in Turkey and will travel to Lebanon as part of his 6-day visit. He warned of a third world war being fought piecemeal. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview tonight, joined by the political commentator, Benedict Spence, and the Associate Director of the Centre for Public Policy at the University of Glasgow, Kezia Dugdale. Well, among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front page of The Guardian about another government U-turn. Its headline, Ministers ditch Manifesto pledge for job protection from day one. That and plenty more after this.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time to see what's making the headlines then with the political commentator, Benedict Spence, and the Associate Director of the Centre for Public Policy at the University of Glasgow, Kezia Dugdale. Welcome. Lovely to see both of you. Well, plenty to discuss. Let's take a look at the front pages, shall we? Starting with The Guardian, and news that the government is to ditch its manifesto commitment to give workers job protection from the day they start is top story for The Guardian. Day one protection of workers abandoned is how The Times headlines that story. The Financial Times describes it as diluting a flagship bill and caving in to pressures from business already under pressure from increased costs such as national insurance and the minimum wage. But despite this U-turn, the Eye says the Prime Minister has denied that the tax increases in yesterday's budget broke any manifesto promises. The Telegraph says the PM has ripped up his former deputy, Angela Rayner's bill on workers' rights to the anger of Labour backbenchers. The Sun speaks to the uncle of Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who tells the paper he hates her budget. The headline, Britain's being fleeced by my niece. After all the bad press over the budget, the Metro leads with the Prime Minister's welcoming of a fall in net UK migration, even though the number of asylum seekers arriving has gone up. Daily Mail, though, says that while asylum seekers continue to arrive, Britain is suffering a new brain drain as people leave the country because of what the paper calls Starmer's socialist chaos. Well, the Express returns to the subject of assisted dying with a plea from a group of terminally ill campaigners to peers not to delay the bill currently going through Parliament. While the Star speaks to TV celebrity Jack Osborne about his plans for a new show currently in production. Isn't he still in the jungle? Am I behind? I'm asking the wrong people. You've not seen it. Anyway, and I've missed it for days because I've been working. Anyway, Benedict and Kezia are here. Right, let's go to U-turns, or one of them, we'll see. First of all, though, Kezia, let's talk about workers' rights. This is day one rights to unfair dismissal, which business were really not happy about.
Well, let's start with the fact this is a really interesting and instructive story the day after a budget which has been criticised for being very anti-business. So it feels quite planned to me that Labour have today U-turned on something that was in their manifesto, which is this idea that employees would get the right to pursue unfair dismissal on the first day of their employment. That's a manifesto commitment. Prior to this, you had to wait 2 years before you earned those rights. So it's a U-turn today which is pushing that one-day right back to 6 months. So it's still considerable progress on the rights people had before, but it's not what Labour had in their manifesto.
But from 2 years to day one, why did anyone ever think that was a good idea?
Well, I didn't know what I think it was a good idea. I think it was the start of a negotiating position, ultimately. And I think that that's probably where they started off thinking, well, you know, obviously you go in hardline. Nobody was expecting that to be the case long term. Perhaps they sort of lasted a little longer than they thought. Maybe they thought if Angela Rayner had still been Deputy Prime Minister, they could have pushed on for more, but actually that you should just sort of take what you can get. But I think that there's no question, more broadly speaking, that there will be a lot more sort of animus, I think, from various factions involved with the Labour Party and the Labour movement to try and get as much as they can, given that this budget, more broadly speaking, I think is simply a massive appeal to backbenchers of all different sorts of stripes. This isn't necessarily about appealing to the entire country or to any sort of international markets or anything like that. This is about trying to say to Labour MPs, please, can you not actually rebel against anything? Can you please get on board with this? Can you please not have a leadership contest? Can you please just try and keep everything together? We're on your side. We're all part of a team here. And if not, it's all going to go horribly badly wrong. I think that that was what this was, a unifying exercise. And I do think, actually, had Angela Rayner still been in place, maybe there would have been a sense that more could have been got out of this. But for the time being, I think you just sort of take what you can get.
Well, we saw the CBI conference earlier this week. Kemi Badenoch made her entire speech about this employment rights bill, did she not? And how difficult it was for business, on top of employers' national insurance, minimum workers' pay, which has gone up again in the budget yesterday. So, you know, how difficult has it been, do you think, for even the Prime Minister to U-turn on this? Because he was apparently fully behind this employment rights bill as well as Angela Rayner.
So, as I say, I think the timing of this is planned. And another thing to look in yesterday's budget is how much Labour made a play of investing in young people, more investment in apprenticeships. They want to address the high number of economically inactive young people in particular. It's very hard to do that if you're going to put employers off of employing young people because they fear those unfair dismissal claims on day one. Important to say, though, that the rights around paternity leave and statutory sick pay are still accrued from day one. Now, that makes a lot of sense to me. Imagine changing jobs and making that big move in your life and then finding out, you know, the next day or the first day in your new job that you're very unwell. I think there should be protections within the system that can address that. I think that's a valuable thing, and I'm glad to see it there.
Yes, and we did look it up, didn't we, before you came on, which was 6 months at statutory pay. So you can work for 1 day and you can get 6 months sick pay.
Yes, that sounds that sounds like quite an improvement. But I think broadly, just to go back to what you were saying, Kezia, it's an incredibly difficult balancing act that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have to do, because we've had this budget and everybody was sort of talking about how it was almost going to be sort of Armageddon coming down the road. It was going to be a catastrophe, dreadful for business. I don't think it's been great, but I think for the time being, they're managing to sort of just about get away with it. However, it's a sticking plaster, because we've all seen what the forecasts say about spending on welfare, about spending on the NHS, everything that's going to happen over the course of this Parliament, and of course juxtapose that with the figures around people leaving this country, which I'm sure we'll get to later. The problem is, how are you going to be able to continue to raise money in order to plug all of these holes as they crop up? You need growth. There isn't any growth at the moment. So as much as this has been a budget for people who are out of work and for helping plug the black hole in the economy, it has to be with one eye on the future. If you kill any of that growth, what little growth we have, the anemic growth, well, you are going to be in a whole world of trouble just 6 months, a year's time when we get to that position. And then you're simply delaying the inevitable, which is the leadership question again, the backbench rebellions again. That's not what they want, ultimately.
Well, the Financial Times, in its sort of sub-headline, says employers hail this compromise. So they're clearly pleased about this dilution, which is how they suggested. Day one Dismissal Protection Act, no growth budget faces attack. So that's their next sentence. Was it a no growth budget, do you think? Was there nothing on there to inspire people in this country?
So I think it certainly lacked a compelling narrative about growth and what the government was doing to incentivise that. And I think there are lots of reasons for that, not least the horrendous trail into the budget that we had and so many last-minute changes. We forget, because although it was only 2 weeks ago, we had the whole pitch roll from the Chancellor around putting up income tax by 1 or 2 pence. We never quite found out, but all that groundwork was done and then abandoned. So clearly it's a very difficult time within the Treasury trying to get this budget out of the door. I think if you look at yesterday's budget in isolation, without all the drama that led up to it, it was a very classic Labour budget. It put a lot of money into raising the minimum wage, additional protections around welfare reform, removal of the 2-child cap. Important to recognise that 6 out of 10 children who are going to receive that additional money come from households that work. We very automatically go to an argument that this is an out-of-work benefit, that it's benefit street, to use Kemi Badenoch's language. That's not the reality of this. This is investment in tackling child poverty, which is ultimately good for the economy.
Yes, I certainly heard a social worker on the radio yesterday who said she has 3 children and actually she's working absolutely full-time, and this will make a really big difference to her, the extra money. But nonetheless, let's go to The Guardian. Ministers ditch Manifesto pledge on job protection from day one, despite the insistence today from Sir Keir Starmer to our political editor and others that the changes that we saw yesterday do not amount to a Manifesto pledge break on tax. Now, do you agree? And fundamentally, does it matter to people out there whether manifestos are being broken on employment rights or on taxation?
It doesn't matter if manifestos are ever broken, because people assume, and so this is a much more sort of broad point, people assume that their politicians are going to lie to them. If they hadn't broken anything and there'd been no suggestion, they would have gone up in people's estimations, because they'd have gone, an honest politician. But fundamentally, we are starting from such a low base to begin with. The bar is in hell. So actually, when they go, we haven't actually broken it, we've just sort of fiddled around the edges, people are just going, I don't care, I'm poorer. And I think that that's generally the feeling. The perception is that an awful lot of working people who, let's be clear here, too many working people are not earning enough, and that is partly due to a lack of economic growth. But an awful lot of people who are young and, well, I wouldn't even say young, sort of approaching middle age now, and sort of feel that they should be at a certain point in life but are not because their wages haven't grown in basically over a decade, and that the country is still effectively in a period of basically stagnation since the last financial crisis. When that's the situation, I really don't think people care about, oh, you're just changing the thresholds rather than an actual increase. Yeah, no, I feel poorer, you're not doing anything for me. So I don't think it really makes it that much better. But as I say, we're starting from a very low point here.
You sound frustrated.
I'm
this is like a therapy session for Benedict.
But I hide it through my jaunty smile and comedy moustache. It's all fantastic. It's really
November
great.
going strong, I can see. Well done. Daily Telegraph, Starmer rips up Rayner's rights bill. You know, what's it to do with Rayner? He said this week that he'd like to see her come back, for example. But presumably she's not happy about this. And how critical was the unfair dismissal part of this employment rights bill in terms of the whole of it?
So I think this is overplayed, the idea that this is sort of revenge for what's happened to Angela Rayner. The reality is that this was a very clear Labour Party commitment to improve employment rights, and the whole party would stand full square behind it. The defence that Labour are putting out tonight is that it was facing a very difficult passage through the House of Lords. The Conservative and Lib Dem peers were being particularly difficult around it. It had struggled through 2 readings. And if it was going to have a third difficult round in the Lords, it'd be very difficult for this law to be in place when people wanted it to come into effect next April, which is important for a lot of the elections happening the length and breadth of the country next year. So it's a kind of convenient excuse. But again, I would point to the fact that the government needed a pro-business story the day after the budget.
And for business, you find many elements of this employment rights bill very difficult. Why is it necessary? Is it a reaction to what we've had before? Is it the gig economy? Is it hire fire? Why has it been drawn up in the first place?
So Labour made a big play whilst in opposition around some of the very unfair practices that were happening in the labour market. For example, the use of zero-hour contracts, which ensured that people never accrued the rights that you would ordinarily expect in the workplace. Arguably, this package of measures was an overcorrection for that. You could also argue that this was a bunch of measures which they knew would be negotiated down. So what's interesting about this story is that a deal has clearly been done between some big employers and the STUC to settle on this compromise between day one rights and rights that accrue 6 months in.
I don't understand that. They've made such a play that they've not broken their manifesto on taxation, and here is something that's in your manifesto that you're happy to have negotiated away. That doesn't make any sense at all, does it? So there's clearly pressure from potentially the Labour backbenchers to stick by the original budget on taxation, because they've frittered this one away quite simply in the end.
I think so, but I think there's also an understanding, ultimately, that it can't simply be, for instance, that one side gets absolutely everything that they want, because ultimately, if you just have that, where you've got such an imbalance of power, eventually the government will collapse. Yeah, this is why I say, go back to saying it's a very delicate sort of balancing act, where I know that there are some backbenchers in the Labour Party who genuinely believe in a very sort of hard left cause and that everything can be solved with the wealth tax and that it'll all be sunlit uplands after that and that the workers of the world will unite. But everybody else is fairly aware of the fact that this is an incredibly awkward moment, not simply because the party itself might implode, but also because the bond markets are sort of looking on with great amounts of interest going, oh, what's going on here? And it's that sort of general sort of broader outlook, which is if you want the government to survive and keep functioning, there does have to be this sort of little bit of give and take, because if it's simply intransigent and it's this one way out, it's just we're going to bulldoze through this and it's going to be our way or the highway. Well, we've seen how that goes. We have an example of when a very ideologically driven government comes into power and decides they're going to have a really ideologically driven government, and nobody really knows what Liz Truss is up to these days anymore. I know it's from a very different angle.
She did a video about the budget.
Was it good?
Watch, to be fair. Yes.
Was it as good as Kemi's speech? I mean, that was pretty barnstorming as well.
Yeah. Just very quickly on budget stories, electric car drivers face yearly mileage checks, according to the Telegraph, as we saw today. Reeves rushes her 2029 pensions tax rate into law quickly to reassure sceptical markets. And then finally, The Guardian says Reeves's tax rises may be fiscal fiction. So there's plenty of day two coverage as well. But coming up in the next part of our programme, we will be talking about net migration, significantly lower. But who is leaving? Back in a moment.
Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Mr. President, what will you say next to Benjamin Netanyahu? In June 2009, did you stay at the apartment in Manhattan of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions about him.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent. I've interviewed some of America's most recognisable politicians.
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK?
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting.
Mr. Walker, you're anti-abortion, but 2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir?
Connor, what did you say to the President? What did you say?
We had a great meeting. He was a great man.
I'm David Blevins, one of Sky's US correspondents, based in Washington, D.C.
David Blevins from Sky News. Fire chiefs say that they're really stretched to the limit and running out of water. What have you got to say to that?
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here.
Why only in America? Why is this American exceptionalism? I just want to understand why you do not think that guns are the problem.
Why is this just an American problem?
The anger too, and the division.
Where are you from? From Sky News, UK.
Yeah. Back up.
Mr. Navarro,
I'm allowed to ask questions, aren't I?
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding, Mr. Musk. Has your ego and ignorance cost Ukrainian lives?
David Cameron needs to worry about his own country, and frankly, he can kiss my ass.
Mr. Patel, did you endanger public safety when you said the killer was in custody?
Free wherever you get your news.
What words do you have for Harry Dunn's family today?
Have a nice day.
Do you fear a 4th indictment? Is it a draw?
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Welcome to the world.
Come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? This is the war game.
There were a number of armed security.
We want to discover, to find out what's really going on.
Everything you need to know about British politics in about 20 minutes.
I actually don't like political drama.
So, where next?
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me once again, Benedict Spence and Kezia Dugdale. Welcome back to both of you. Benedict, let's go to the Metro, shall we? And migration figures out today, which the PM is celebrating.
Yes, he is celebrating because he's going to be able to turn around and say, well, this is obviously one of the major things that's been driving politics in this country for quite a amount of time, is that successive governments have promised to bring down immigration. People have voted for it, and the government has then turned around and gone, no, it's going up, and there's nothing really you can do about it. Well, now those figures are starting to come down, and it is partly because of a change in rules that was brought in under the previous government to do with all sorts of things like dependents and spouses and that sort of thing. But there is also a little nugget in there that needs to be paid attention to, and that is the number of British people under the age of 35 working in full-time employment who are emigrating because they feel that they are being put under the cosh because of tax, because of the living situation, because of the general malaise that they feel. It's about, I had remembered it, I've forgotten it, it's two-thirds of all Brits who are emigrating are under 35 and they're in work and they're going to places like the Gulf, they're going to the Anglosphere, so Australia, New Zealand, Canada, but they're also going to places in southern Europe where they're offering them very, very lucrative digital nomad visas where the tax rates are very low and you go and you have the Mediterranean lifestyle and cost of living is very cheap.
You're sounding quite tempted.
There's a certain irony in this, that it is literally the pigs countries, it's Portugal, Italy, Spain and Greece, are suddenly really great options for young people if you just happen to work at a computer. This is deeply concerning because we don't have that many net contributors tax-wise left in this country, relatively, and it would appear that a not insignificant number, over 100,000, are being siphoned off into other tax regimes. You need to keep those if you want to keep the country going.
Yes,
sadly, we're not.
It's led the Telegraph to say young people flee Labour's high-tax Britain. This, of course, comes amid an ageing population, which is, as we know, expensive. Should the government be concerned about this, do you think? And I watched Macron today, you know, doing a form of national service. I'm like, do you know what? There's no work for 18 and 19-year-olds. That's why, that could be partly why he's doing that, apart from, you know, a strong face in front of Russian aggression. But anyway.
So youth unemployment has been slowly rising, and it's now at a 10-year high, standing at 15%. So that will be something that worries the government. And again, it perhaps speaks to why there was such a focus on opportunities for young people in yesterday's budget. The Metro is a page of celebration for the government, unquestionably, but this is the hidden detail behind the story. Slight note of caution, though, is that this is the first time we've had this data broken down by age demographics, so there's no trend to set it against. It's not clear how this sits, you know, over the past 5 years or so. But the idea that there are over 100,000 young people aged 18 to 34 choosing to make their life somewhere other than Britain after so much has been invested in their own educational opportunities, of course, would worry the government.
We haven't got very long left, so shall I jump to the Daily Star or not? Go on, then. You've got it in your hand.
What? Preparedness? I have no idea what this story is about. I don't watch television. I don't even know where I am right now. This is a very awkward moment for me. So this is one of the Osborns. Given that Ozzy is dead, I assume, therefore, Jack. And he's been on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of It, and he would like some more money. Is that about right? Have I summed that up?
That'll do it.
Isn't that so professional, so seamless?
It's a family Osborne page, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. It's just all of them.
If that was your best effort, time to go.
Oh, dear.
We're ahead, I think, actually. Kezia and Benedict, thank you both very much indeed. We will see you for more. After this short break, top stories are next.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force. It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.